Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Here with me today is the Tea Technique editorial team, Patrick Penny,
Hey, hey.
Zongjun Li,
Hello, hello.
and Emily Huang.
Hey.
Today, we're discussing our trip reports from the Tea Technique Research Trip 2025 to Yiwu. This is going to be a casual conversation, as casual as this editorial team ever manages to be. We're going to be moderated by Emily Huang because Emily was not on the trip. For me, Pat, and Zongjun, we were in Yiwu processing tea, preparing for a subsequent book. We're going to write a pu'er book. It's expected to take a really long time. And this was my maybe fourth time in Yiwu. Zongjun, this was your.
Second time.
And Pat, this was your.
My first time ever.
And Huang, you have never been to Yiwu.
Zero time.
Emily, I'll turn it over to
Definitely.
you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to get to interview the three of you on your trip and your experience in Yunnan since I wasn't there. I did see lots of pictures going on Instagram, our group chats and stuff. Like you mentioned, it's going to be a casual conversation. And I'm going to start with Pat. This is your first time. Was there any difference in what you imagined?
I just love that we're like casual conversation. We literally, we can't just have a casual conversation. Tea Technique stays driven. We stay on track. But yeah, great question, Emily. Yunnan was a lot more casual, I feel like, than many of the other places that we've been, both in the way that you interact with people, but I feel like the way that I even saw the approach to some of the tea farming or tea picking. Casual maybe is not the right word for how it has showed up in the agriculture, but it's more about this spirit, I think, of like letting things be how they are. We saw that show up with the tea plants with really minimal intervention compared to a lot of the other places that we've been. Tea picking when we were in Yunnan didn't look like it started until like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, which is much later than where I've seen in a lot of other places. In general, the schedule had a lot more breadth to it. We were able to kind of take space, take stock, stop, and really enjoy some of the moments with these farmers and producers, which was a nice change of pace because on some of our other trips, it can be very go, go, go. It can be extremely scheduled. And it just felt like Yunnan does not run on a schedule. That's kind of what I got out of it. But interested in
Yeah.
Zongjun and Jason's thoughts.
No, it doesn't. It definitely feels more free. There's no pace or no set schedule. Just like how the teas are picked and how the teas are processed. It's all in the flow.
These trips are, major time commitments. They're budgetary commitments. They're research and focus commitments. So I have a serious drive to plan them to make sure that it's going to be worthwhile, that this is the right thing to be doing this year. We only get to do this all together once a year. And Yunnan is particularly difficult for that. You message people months in advance. You're like, okay, we're thinking on these dates. And they're like, probably works. It sounds fine. Message us like a week beforehand. Message us when you're on your way. Message us when you get to town.
That's easy when you're scheduling flights internationally and visas, right?
Yeah. So it does pose a real problem. Usually, though, if they tell you they're going to be there around that time, they're there. I think for me, the thing that really stuck out this time that was different even than I remembered it, this time we consistently ate with a couple of families we were having quite a bit of food with. And, in the past, it either cycled between places or something felt celebratory. And so I couldn't say what the everyday cuisine of Yiwu is. But this time, having spent so much longer there and more consistently with the families and really just being part of the more day-to-day activities. And we should talk more about how over the course of a little more than a week, it really felt like we got into a groove, like we were part of village life at some point. But I think the thing that really stuck out to me is that the farmers, the tea makers, the tea farmers, the tea processors got rich and they kept making all the farming food, but now they make all the farming food. So every single meal, there were 3 meats on the table. We had a pork, a chicken, and a beef, I think, at every single meal. And it was so much more meat and so much more fat. All of this food was cooked in fat and it all tasted great. But, we come from a rich Western diet. I love good French cooking. I'll use a stick of butter in my coq au vin
Jason
but
has
this
steak
felt like
3 times a day.
This felt like a lot of fat.
This was a lot of fat. Yeah. There's not a trip we've had in the past where I gained weight. I always go to China and lose weight, whether for, questionable sanitary or eating condition issues, or just I'm eating a healthier diet in some cases. This was the first trip we've been on where I gained significant, like I gained 4 or 5 pounds when I got back, which is, never
Oh my
happened
God.
before. And it's like all fat. It's all sodium and it's all fat. I lost muscle. I lost water weight. I gained fat and sodium.
More fat and more tea. I hope the airline didn't charge you extra. Here, wait. I would say it's absolutely true. I mean, we also come in a very different season in the past. It's right in the middle of tea harvest season. We come right at the window of the season was about to begin. So there were a lot of laborers work. People are picking tea, people are processing tea. So I feel like the diet was a little bit a supplement out of the hard works that we've been putting in.
Yeah, we just weren't the ones doing the hard work, except for our processing days and nights here and there. We weren't really the pickers. I think the pickers are the ones who really needed all that extra calories.
Yeah. I was gonna say I saw some pictures of you guys doing hard work, like actual sweaty,
There were a few hours.
Work.
There were a few hours. So we had a few different processing days, which I think is probably worth talking about in depth.
Yep.
So yeah, we had a full day of processing in Gaoshan where we really went through everything up to the drying stage. We were there when the tea was picked the night before. We got to see some of the withering of this leaf. We did visit the garden where these leaves were picked from. And then we were doing the shaching by ourselves. So we were given a little bit of guidance, but really it was pretty hands off. And we were in front of the wok for, depending on who was firing, somewhere between probably 14 and 20 minutes. And it was kind of, we were given pointers here and there, but if the tea is bad, it's our fault. If the tea is good, it's probably the tea's. Thankfully, the tea was pretty good. But then from there, we were doing the ronien, the rolling as well. And so we're actually all really interested to find out whose tea tastes best in the next couple months when we get it. Because I rolled real hard and heavy. I was not, our host told us you can't overroll the tea. And I took that to heart. So I really rolled the hell out of that tea. Whereas, Zongjun was delicate and gentle with his tea. He was treating it like a good friend. And Jason did something in between. And we had a chance to taste that tea a few days later. And maybe we'll talk about this after we talk about processing. But following that experience in Yiwu village, we had a few nights in a row where we got to do both shaching with a little bit more guidance, as well as a good amount of rolling and spreading the leaves, checking on withered leaves. So we had quite a lot of different opportunities to touch leaf from different areas in different parts of the processing stage and get a better understanding of how the leaf, particularly depending on what the weather was like, reacts to all these different stages of processing, which I feel like you just can't get without being there in person. So that was amazing.
I'd also say there's some real stylistic differences between the various families, that certain families wanted the tea made in certain ways, and we get to the other family and they're like, oh no, this is not how we do it. I would not say that one is good or one is bad, but there's certainly, even within a family, one of the families does their own processing and they do contract processing, and the style is different between their own processing and the tea that's produced on contract. And so would I say we developed our own style? Absolutely not. But trying to pick up and to follow these different pointers and then realizing that these pointers are actually conflicting, and realizing that there's real decision making in different styles and different objectives throughout this processing, I think was a pretty interesting learning, because you're somewhat used to that across areas. Zongjun and I processed tea 2 years ago in Jingmai, and that was quite different as well.
Oh, super different.
Yeah, and the leaf responded really differently. And so this time, processing everything from the families that we were with that don't do any tidy cha, but processing their shaoshu village tea versus processing, I think the nicest thing that we were allowed to touch was medium age Gushu.
No, dude, they were handing you Yibang
Amazing.
Danju. Don't remember that?
There's a video where they say that, but here not. It was not.
They were kidding.
You've done this once before. Here's one of the most expensive teas we're going to get this year.
I
Okay.
was super surprised that, we've done processing in other places too, outside of Yunnan. And we've seen how tea being treated in different ways. And I was just surprised at how much steaming is actually going on in the pan frying process. So it's not really just frying the tea.
Mhm.
At some stage, you have a cadence of trying to compile the tea together to keep the moisture in the pile so that it build up some sort of a steam inside. So it's really a mixture of frying and steaming, which I feel like that's what gives the Yiwu tea a very unique flavor as well. And also people's decision making also takes account into how this tea will be aged in the future. So it's not only just, thinking about how the tea is going to taste right now, but also thinking ahead in the future. So that's also something very unique.
Wow. It sounds like a really unforgettable experience. I wonder if any of your hands, all 10 fingers are here?
Yo, it hurt so much. Like Jason was a boss. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I'd like to not inflate his ego, but like his hands were just made of steel. And the first time we were processing, like 5 minutes in, I'm okay. 10 minutes in, I'm like sweating and I'm feeling it in my hands. And when I'm really getting to the point where that leaf has a lot of moisture that's like steaming in there, you could only touch the leaves for a few seconds at a time. And I was taking my hands off for as long as I could, letting them cool, going back in. I remember going into it, they were giving us not really giving us the option, but saying you could do it without gloves, but no one does. And I was like, well, yeah, we've fired tea before. I could do it without gloves. Thank God I was wearing gloves. It was so hot. I was such a baby with it. But yeah, Jason, you were a boss.
It was a different level of heat. I would say that's all institute days, going rock climbing in Hunters and central Pennsylvania and coming back to the tea house and brewing tea with your oozing raw fingers. I think I've lost
Hot
all.
guy one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've just lost all feeling my fingertips.
All of my fingers had the
I want to know if Zongjun still has all his fingers.
and all of my fingers have the round of blister every time I touch the wok. But it disappeared after a few hours. But
I actually did get
That's
gnarly
so-
burn from the wok too.
Yeah. That walk it was 450, I think.
They said that it was dialed in at 280 to 300 C. So yeah, it was pretty hot.
Oh, wow, 280. That is.
it's pretty hard in the area where you need to insert your finger all the way down to the bottom of the leaf pile and try to flip it. That is like the most challenging.
That's even hotter than I said. That's 536 Fahrenheit.
Oh, well.
Felt like
Yeah.
it when my skin touched it, literally milliseconds, and you heard my skin sizzle, and that wasn't even the hot spot. I was baking on that walk. It was crazy
Tastes
how
tasty
fast it
steak.
sizzled.
Oh my
It smelled
God.
good. It smelled like
Medium rare.
Smell like bacon.
kosher bacon.
Zongjun was ever going to have cannibalistic tendencies. Find out who the zombie candidate is.
We can't
Wow,
use
that
these
sounded amazing. I don't think I would be able to withstand that heat and that walk and the steaming and wow.
You'll do it with us next time, Emily. So
Yes,
come.
yes.
It'll come.
Yeah. And so my next question, I know we went into a little bit of the processing, but I wonder if you guys can share with our listeners why Yiwu? How is it important in the Puer world, or what specialty does it have? What role does it play? Why did we choose to go to Yiwu?
I guess there's two answers for that. On the one side, we prepare for this. It sometimes takes a few years. So Zongjun and I went 2 years ago to go establish these relationships, to meet people, to say, here are the books that we've currently written. Here's what we're writing. Here's our plans and what we want to do. Share with them the idea of this Puer book, explain the scope and the scale, explain how we work. And generally, we try to make a good impression. I think for the most part, most of the tea world likes us. And then say, can we come back? Are you willing to do this and to work with us in this way? And so we got a yes from a couple different places in Yunnan. One of them was Yiwu. And I thought that we would return to Yiwu, that we would start in Yiwu, because both Six Famous Tea Mountains, some of the earliest pu'er processing, highest concentration of Gushu, of old trees. And Yiwu was, in many ways, it was spared a lot of the more contemporary agriculture that started in Yunnan during the Puer bubble. And so the processing and some of these ideals have changed much less. I mean, in one of the villages that we were in, they didn't even have electricity, running water until 2010. Other villages were even later, didn't have any electricity until after 2006, after 2010, 26, 2014 or about. So I think that in many ways, if you're going to start somewhere trying to write a book about Puer, you have to start in Yiwu. But the eventual plan is to hit all the major production areas. Zongjun and I have been to Jingmai together. Next year, maybe we'll see how things go. We might do Menghai. We have plans for Linsong. Yeah, plans for a lot of places.
Yeah, it's kind of serendipitous in the way that a lot of people were talking about, you start from Yiwu, you end in Yiwu. And that's might be, our way of learning tea and drinking tea in Yunnan too, because Yiwu is famous for all of its early production and exportation through the Chamagudao, the tea horse trade route. And when you're thinking about Puer, normally you would first go to Puer City, which is the actual place. It's used to be the trading center of all teas in Yunnan. But Yiwu is actually the original trading center of all of the surrounding area in that place in Xishuangbanna. And it's really the center of the universe out there in the corner of Yunnan. And it's a pretty interesting spot to see how all of the early teas got processed, got famous, got sent to different places, and how it played as a major role in different tea cultures around the different corners of the world. So I feel like we picked a very interesting spot to start. And it will be an interesting comparison with other tea production regions in Yunnan, starting from there.
Wow, makes sense now. And one thing that really caught my eye when I was reading the trip report was the profile of Gushu and how it's kind of different to what we were used to or what we've experienced so far about the flavor profile that it gives. Can you guys tell me a little bit more about that? And why do you think that is?
For me, I think the biggest thing is learning about the gradations even within Gushu. I mean, the difference between village tea, forest tea, deep forest tea, the difference between Gushu that can be 100 years old or Gushu that can be 300 years old, Gushu that is Gaogan that comes from a taller arbor tree, Gushu that's hidden in a cotton. They use the same terms like they do in Wui, so it's hidden in a pit. It has less sunlight, and so it grows smaller. The idea that Gushu is always dashu, that it's always big, and in the forest, or it's always tall, or has these huge trunks, isn't the case. And I think that a lot of what I had learned to identify, particularly from outside of Yiwu, as Gushu tea is actually the taste of dashu tree, a big tree, which may or may not be old, but it has a pretty specific flavor and flavor reference. And it's one that I still prefer, but a lot of the highest end Yiwu trees are much more subtle and much lighter flavored than the standard dashu counterparts. And so there were things that I found that made sense. And then there were things that were certainly new to me that are unique to Yiwu. And I think it's partially a matter of preference, and also partially a matter of understanding that, we're talking about, for the most part, with exceptions, we're talking about Daya cultivar, but as ever in tea, fractal complexity, Daya is not truly a single cultivar. There are variations within Daya, and there are certain families with certain opinions about which teas are true Daya and which are not.
It's pretty chaotic and messy, just like the Toa of Yunnan in a way. But I know what you're talking about, Jason, about the dashu flavor. It's the very gamey, like wild flavor that you will frequently end up tasting a lot of Yunnan tea. And it's really not the case for people's quality standard in Yiwu. They are really seeking the very ethereal, light body, floral, very elegant kind of a taste in the tea versus this very robust, very wild, strong, masculine kind of taste that we used to drink back in the days. Of which, it's really a regional preference too, because if you venture into Menghai And people there, they love the robustness from the tea. They talk about 霸气 in Menghai. That's something that the people in Yiwu doesn't necessarily agree with. And that's very interesting. And also tasting all of these, like these single trees or small batch picks versus the mixed picked, which was really the more traditional way of picking. People back in the days, they don't really do like single tree processing. Was very interesting, the whole experience. I can understand how people were saying that a single tree can taste very one-dimensional. For us, it was really analytical tasting. We're tasting a single element of a region or of one tree. And then we can really assess the difference between a gaogan versus a normal dashu or even a xiaoshu. And then we can see how, the terroir, the genetics played as a role, as an impact to the flavor profile, which was very interesting.
The only thing I would push back on, though, is I agree with everything you said about the tasting the dan juice, but there were some families that did have a preference for that yesheng wild cultivar flavor in Yiwu. There were trees that have that flavor that are still considered high quality, that are still expensive trees. It was just some families that took a pretty militant stance and said, oh no, this is not what's good. This is not what Yiwu is known for. This is not what Yiwu is best at. And
or even to the extent that believing that those trees are not meant for consumption, that certain flavor that denotes wild means that actually it was probably never really interacted with by humans in a way to make it more consumable or more in harmony with kind of, our bodies and our nature.
Yeah. And I don't know, I had a preference for it, and I think that I still have a non-exclusive preference for the yesheng flavor, but I certainly understand why those families want to preserve this idea of a Yiwu profile.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of what you both talked about on the flavor touches a lot of maybe what Emily was curious about from the trip report that I was writing. There was definitely, when I came into this experience, there was a profile that I associated with Gushu, which I agree with Jason, maybe was more of that dashu, large tree profile, and actually was probably more predominantly outside of Yiwu. I think I had more examples of younger, maybe, or like large tree Gushu from Menghai area and from Linsong and various other areas that really gave a very specific kind of mouthfeel and certain flavor profile. And so when we were drinking these teas in Yiwu that were, verifiably directly from the source, and we knew that they were Gushu, there was times where I really had to kind of readjust what I thought of as my key indicators of Gushu tea specific to Yiwu. So no longer this is what Gushu tastes like, but this is what Yiwu Gushu tastes like from this area, right? Maybe from this slope, or this is more forest versus village Gushu, and trying to really break down those smaller and smaller pieces of distinction to build back up my idea of what Gushu tastes like. Now, I have kind of a framework of this is, at least within Yiwu, what some of these different gradients of Gushu could taste like. And now I have this whole other black box of this is what I think other Gushu tastes like. And now we have to go and actually visit Menghai and visit some of these other areas so I can once again break down into finer components as to the fractal nature of tea that Jason talked about.
That's so interesting to have it. It's basically what Jason wrote. It's a lot similar to the whole wine culture in the Western world. And it's really interesting because somehow it got me thinking like how I built up my flavor profile. How did I, instead of building it from, this is what oolong tastes like in this region, oolong tastes like in this region, but somehow I have it the other way around. It's like, this is what oolong tastes like, but then there's all different ones. This is what pu'er tastes like, but then there's all different ones. But it probably shouldn't be this way. And the whole bottom, somehow I have it visually horizontally, but it should be bottom up from the region. And I think that's super interesting. This matrix in my mind of it can going from different ways.
It's interesting hearing you talk about it. And, this is an audio medium for our listeners, but like you're kind of gesticulating and I can see how you're trying to describe it. And I think it speaks to a little bit of what we talked about in book 1 around pedagogy, right? So as you're learning, your framework changes. And so I think this was an experience that really changed my framework at how I look at structuring in my mind, how I understand where. And so now I have this really concrete and detailed structure specifically around Yiwu and differentiating Xiaoshu from Dashu and Gushu from non-Gushu teas and village and forest tea. But I still don't have that framework for other areas. And so for our listeners, as you're drinking samples that you're getting and as you're trying to learn what different teas taste like from different regions, I think maybe just trying to always keep an open mind. Don't lock in exactly what you believe to be the truth is. At any given point, let other samples take you on a ride. Because I think for me, I came in with some preconceived notions when we went into Yiwu, and it took a day or two to get around a lot of them. Like, I was drinking tea for 15 years. I've had a lot of examples of Gushu, but, the truth was I hadn't had
Yiwu Gushu.
as many examples of young
Yeah.
Yiwu Gushu or Yiwu Gushu from certain areas of forests, right? So I think allow yourself to continue building that framework. Don't lock into any specific mindset
Yeah.
ever.
And don't
Great.
over-index on references and samples until you're in the place. You don't really have a clear indication of the quality level in which you're drinking at. There are things that I used to like that now I think are just okay. And there are things that I didn't have a conception of 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's now it's like, all right, now we're really drinking at a different level. Now we're doing something else.
There's something we loved, Jason, just a year ago that we bought when we were in Taiwan. We loved it so much that you bought it again this year. And we both still like it, but I think our scales have been recalibrated. Oh, we don't feel like we bought a bad tea, but I think a year ago was a better tea in my mind than it is now.
Yeah, the gradations of quality are in some ways endless. When we were in Yiwu, hearing people talk about other people's danju, it's like, why would you make a danju out of that tree?
What an idiot. They processed that into a danju? That tree is so mid.
Probably some rich Guangdong or Fujian Laoban, end up commissioning.
They talk about it, the Laobans who come in, who don't really know that much, who have enough money, and they're like, all right, pick me a tree. And they're not going to know, or they're not talking to the right, or those people don't have access to the right.
One over there.
Take your pick.
Hey, Zongjun's tea was a Laoban collab, so don't talk bad about the Laobans.
Yeah, but the Hubei man didn't buy
That's right.
any danju.
As I was frying my tea in Kaohsiung, some like Dongbei Laoban just like swoop in and was like, "Can I fry your tea too?" And just like start taking the gloves from my hands.
He must have thought it was just like a hands-on installation. You can just walk in and just start doing it. Anyone can do it. Yeah.
But
He was being super nice about it. Like he did the whole cigarette exchange ceremony, like give everyone a cigarette and then patting our shoulder, asking questions. And it's just like start trying out.
and then he took over frying tea from Zongjun on Zongjun's personal batch.
Like
Well,
very anxiously waiting aside.
He only got a few minutes in. Zongjun took back over, but
We were told that Zongjun's heat management on his wok firing after we tasted all of our teas supposedly was the best. And so I think the Hebei German helped out a little bit.
that man was used to being hands-on. He did not shy away from the heat.
He was doing a little flippy fun time, though. He was not listening to the advice.
He lost a few leaves. But back to that major point, don't over-index. I entirely agree with what you were saying, Pat. But the other thing is people get a sample, particularly Western world. You're not in China, right? You have some various levels of access to these types of things. And so someone sees something and they say, oh, wow, I get to try this set of 4 Gaogan trees, right? 4 trees blended Gaogan. And then they say, okay, now this is what Gaogan tastes like, or this is what, this area tastes like, or this is a new step up. And it might be right. It might be true. But over-indexing on that kind of thing, over-indexing on specific attributes when you haven't tasted across a range is very difficult to do. And I would say that even in Yiwu, there's not agreement. Even amongst the people making the tea, there's not agreement on what it should taste like. That type of side sniping, that type of commentary, tasting other people's tea and later discussing what was good about this, what was bad about this. And I think that was the most number of danjus that I've ever tasted. They did not all taste alike. And there was definitely commentary back and forth between different groups and different families. This is good for this reason. This is bad for this reason. And maybe you agree with them and maybe you don't. Different families are producing different things and have different techniques. But if there's no agreement amongst the makers, if there's no agreement amongst the people who have the best access that you can have, then how do you think that you're going to have agreement having tasted somewhere between 0 and I'm going to guess less than 10 danjus?
Yeah. One thing that we really learned is listen to your body, how your body feels about it, instead of trying to give a very deep assessment on the flavors and trying to make sense out of those flavor attributes. I think it's something that we found it actually quite useful.
Mm.
A bit, kind of TCME, like in the beginning, but you actually do end up feeling different effects on your
Yeah.
body. And that's something very quite interesting. One thing that Yunnan really doesn't lack is diversity. You have diversity of opinions, you have diversity of tea, you have diversities of food, you have diversities of people and culture. It's really one messy place. Follow your true heart. You end up feeling the best with the xiaoshu. Great, congratulations. That will save you a lot of money in the future.
But to be clear, and to Pat's point, because he wrote about this in his trip report, is that deep forest xiaoshu, deep forest trees that are 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, that are grown in a natural environment, that are untended or not overly pruned.
That
they're
is
gonna be-
great.
Yeah, they're going to be better than some Gushu trees that are right in the village, right next to someone's AC,
The highways.
or the new highway that's been built right through it with the lorry trucks dumping diesel fumes on them. The environment counts for a lot. The environment counts for, I would say, the most. In aggregate, I'm agreeing with you, Zongjun, that it's not, for lack of a better word, it's not Wu. If you feel the constriction of your throat, if you feel the tightness in your jaw, if you feel like you want to drink more versus if you want to drink less. One of the amazing things was we were drinking so much tea, never once did it churn our stomach. In Yiwu, drinking young Yiwu that was
Oh, yeah.
2 weeks ago, a week ago, yesterday, grabbing partially dried young Yiwu tea, even forest xiaoshu, and brewing 8 grams in an overflowing gaiwan and just going 25 brews on it. It felt fine. It never turned our stomachs.
The one thing that I think made us all feel not great was actually a sample that we brought, right? It was a sample of Yiwu. And we're like 3 or 4 brews in, and our hosts are kind of pointing out to us some of the less positive features of the tea. And so there might have been some bias there, but, we were all starting to feel it. And one of the host fathers is kind of like, you know what? I'm going to whip out a really good tea because I can see you're all suffering now. And so this really nice, I think that was 2009, Guafeng Jai comes out. And suddenly you're just like, oh, my stomach feels better now. I'm okay. But yeah. To your point, I think, we had heard the advice many times on all these trips and in the past that to listen to your body beyond just your palate. Let your body indicate to you the quality of the tea.
Yeah.
But never so clearly as in Yiwu did I feel it, particularly with young tea. In many other spots, young tea definitely still turns your stomach. Maocha almost killed Zongjun last year. But the young tea in Yiwu, like Jason hammered home, still felt so clean, clear, and honestly healthy on your body. Sometimes high doses of tea don't feel amazing. I was a little worried going into this trip how much young Maocha we were going to drink, what that was going to do to our stomachs. But yeah, not a single issue related to drinking young Maocha. Issues related to eating lots of spicy peppers, salty food, and lots of lard. But the Maocha, never a problem.
After all this, it really just reminded me of how next time, whatever tea I'm tasting, listen to my body, let my body and my palate, of course, we can still be analytical and stuff, but also be aware of these, biological responses as well. And another thing is the diversity. So much that I'm looking forward to your next trip and all the other discussions on the other parts of Yunnan and digging into the different flavor profiles. The bachi, I really want to know what bachi in tea means, and I want to try that. Is there something that you want to share, like a little preview to our listeners, what they can expect in the pu'er tea, or would you, maybe that's a secret for now?
It's less of a secret and more that we don't know. How long do we think this book is going to take to write? I think it's going to be at least another 2-3 years of research before we actually start writing.
We should probably finish the Yixing book too.
We're working on it. We're gonna get back in a groove after this trip.
I will have a
Yeah.
kid. Pat will have 2 kids the time this book gets started.
Something you need to tell us, Zongjun?
When we were, so everyone, you're hearing it now for the first time. When we were in Yiwu, Zongjun met a Yibang princess. He's about to inherit a ton of Gushu. You really, like, if you don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
Zongjun yet, start hitting him up on his DMs because you're going to want to know this guy.
Well, more about that. We'll connect offline.
Emily was
Connect-
like, I
connect.
want to find a Yibang princess.
It was interesting. So we always write our trip reports independently, separately. And I think for me, Pat, within your trip report, the thing that really stood out to me as maybe, I don't know if different is the right word, but where we took a difference in opinion. One was your ideas on brewing, going back to predominantly flash brewing. Usually our takeaways are pretty aligned and we debate everything pretty heavily. That didn't even occur to me until I read your trip report. And yeah, if you want to talk about that, I thought that was a difference.
Yeah. So this past weekend, Jason and I were just on a tea call together, and we're casually drinking Lo Shuidong, Gaogan, Gushu, Danju, as we do, 2023. And we're brewing this tea. And Jason, you had already read my trip report at this point, but both of us, you and I, were both flash brewing. And I think for me, it was being in Yiwu and being in Yunnan and experiencing this flash brewing, particularly experiencing the specific characteristics that the processors and the farmers that we had studied and stayed with pointed out. I think for me, those resonated as characteristics that I really enjoy in Yiwu tea. And so, I'm not going to exclusively flash brew Yiwu tea in the future, but I think I'm going to start incorporating it again. Not like I've never flash brewed in my life, but definitely I did a lot of flash brewing the first year or two studying tea. And then we studied with a lot of Taiwanese teachers. I moved to a slightly different brewing methodology, but particularly for pu'er and particularly for Yiwu pu'er in the future, at least when I'm evaluating a tea, I think that's where I'm going to start because that's where processors are starting. That's kind of the gold standard for what these farmers and processors are looking for. And so I'll start there and then I'll test tea just like you always should. I'll see different ratios and different methods to find out what I like the best. But the sweetness, the aftertaste, a lot of the lighter, more ethereal floral flavors, all of these things come out in spades in Yiwu tea when you flash brew, particularly when you're not in Yiwu and your water is actually 212 degrees boiling Fahrenheit. That helps a little bit too.
Zongjun, what was the most surprising thing that you read in Pat's trip report?
Surprising thing that I read.
What's something that Pat wrote about that I wouldn't say you disagree with, but for me, unless we're doing experimentation things, I don't really plan too much on changing my brewing. I didn't feel like I went to Yiwu and learned a whole lot about brewing.
That I would agree with you, Jason. But I will also agree with Pat that it's really how people brew tea over there. So probably maintaining at least a few brews of flash brewing just to have the reference. I think it's important in the future to set a reference for your own knowledge. But it doesn't really change the way of my brewing, like how the Chaozhou grandpas changed my tea consumption habit. I'm still more Chaozhou than you in terms of brewing method.
I've just become such a Yixing bro, hanging out with me and all these Yixing teapots. I'm not against flash brewing. It's just most of the time that I'm going to pick up a tea, particularly great tea, probably no matter how good it is, I don't think I want to go 22 brews.
I understand that.
Modify my dosage and get it a little bit stronger and a little more full flavored, and going 10 brews on a tea where each brew is a little bit stronger, and maintaining that balance, picking the right wares, picking the right dosage. But pure flash for the entire session just feels, no, tedious isn't the right word. It's just not the flavor profile that I want.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not the time that you have, right? I mean, you and I spent an hour and a half on Saturday drinking this Lo Shuidong Gaogan Gushu Danju, and
An hour
an
and
hour and a half,
Oh.
and that barely
still going.
cut into the tea. I
It was still
mean, the
going.
tea was still going so strong. I threw it in a thermos. I had it in a thermos later that day. I refilled the thermos. It was still so strong. I boiled it the next day, and that tea honestly probably did not give out. I just decided I was done with it.
Pat probably went further than me. I did Lauren Cha for 3 rounds on it and then boiled it the next day.
Yeah, so flash is not always the right choice, depending on time either. And, you know, we used 6 grams of that tea. That's a lot of tea of that caliber to be using. Zongjun wasn't surprised about anything in my trip report because I didn't write about the Wa bar that we went to.
Yeah. Zongjun did not make friends with.
Oh yeah, tell me more about that.
We made friends with the Wa tribe. Pat and I are now honorary Wa tribe members. We
Oh,
can
yeah.
spit fire with the
It's-
best of them.
We did
But-
meet some Wa princesses, but there was like 2 or 3 Hani there as well. There was
The
Wa
Hani
people
tribe
and-
was visiting the Wa.
Yeah. And so it was Hani people, Wa people, and 2 Jews, two blonde hair, blue eyed Jews.
And so now, opposite question from Pat. What did you disagree? Was there anything that either of you disagreed about in my trip report?
I just hated it. It just fucking sucked.
40 pages in, Pat's like, huh?
40 pages in, and that's when I was just like, you know what? No, I don't like this. No, I can honestly say that so I read yours after writing mine, right? And I was very happy. Even some of the linguistic choices that we both made, there was some alignment there. So it was enjoyable reading your take after mine and seeing, like, you know, for the most part, we took away a lot of the same things. We also didn't write about our Xiaokao experience. The Xiaokao was in Kunming. So, yeah, we didn't write about anything in Kunming. There was the one really great Xiaokao experience. Well, we actually did go to Xiaokao multiple times when we were in Yiwu. But the one that really sticks in my mind, other than having it with our host family, was when we were watching the girl heat the grill up with a hairdryer.
Oh yeah,
That's the real flavor of Yiwu right there. Is like you've got an electric hairdryer just sitting on the grill,
On the grill.
sitting directly on the grill, turned on to blow air onto the charcoal to eat it up. That was amazing. That meat was delicious.
That was good, but nothing will ever be better than Kunming Xiaokao.
Yeah, that was next level. That was next level.
Zongjun told me that Xi'an Xiaokao can compare, and I was severely disappointed.
really,
They banned charcoal within the walled city.
really, wow, that's bad.
No more charcoal. I
Well, I
think
haven't been back to Xi'an for years, but it used to be really good.
nah, nothing on Kunming. Not even in the same league.
I was pretty surprised this time with all the Xiaokao in Yiwu, because last time it was pretty mid. But this time
Yeah.
we got some recommendation of the spot that the locals like to go to, and that was pretty good.
That was definitely passable. I would say the other big difference is that we realized that Lao beer gives us a pounding headache, and we stopped drinking it.
Every time it gave me a headache.
It's pretty awful. So that makes a big difference in your enjoyment level of Xiaokao and beer.
You've tuned into Xiaokao and Beer Technique. Join us next week as we talk about the Xiaokao as beer of Shanghai.
Just to bring it back around, we've been radio silent for a little while. I haven't sent out as probably as many updates and everything as we should, but coming out now is Pat's trip report, my trip report, of course, this conversation, which we'll post in its entirety, and then we'll get back to publishing Yixing. And then for those of you who are in New York, I'll host a tasting on Yiwu teas, and we'll also do an AMA.
And you've got some other trip reports because you just came back from another trip to China where you said you weren't going to do much tea stuff, and then you did a lot of tea stuff. So
I did.
tell us about that.
I did do a lot of tea stuff. I was all over the place. I was in Wui, not Yiwu, Wui. It's easy to do that in English. I was in Wui, so I did a bunch of additional work on Yangcha and surrounding area. I was in Sichuan, got to have some great Sichuan green teas and meet some people there. I was in, where else was I doing tea stuff? I was in Taipei.
You went to Jingdezhen, didn't you?
I was in Jingdezhen. Jingdezhen was pretty interesting, very different than Yixing, totally different scale, also totally different things going on.
While you were in Wuyi, you made a little trip to a certain village.
Yep. Yeah. The village that shall not be named, but there was quite a bit of interesting and remote areas in the surrounding of Wuyi, some of which are more or less famous than others. But, you know, the Wuyi Park was carved out of a specific area, and it truly is a historical park. But to the north, and particularly to the northwest, is very pristine forest and mountain areas growing some excellent teas. And I'm going to write a good amount about this very soon. But the Zhengyang is famous and sought after and desirable for a reason. But the exact boundaries and borders of the Zhengyang were prescribed very late, quite a bit later than people realize. Only it was after the 1980s, somewhere in the 80s, that the specific borders got turned into a park and everything was restricted. But the surrounding areas have been historically growing tea and processing tea in a very similar style for a long time. So there's a lot to say about that. And then I was in Lushan as well, another green tea production area. So yeah, it was a lot of travel.
Very cool.
So basically, more to come this next coming months from the Tea Technique team.
More to come.
Yep. Stay tuned. Don't cancel your subscription yet.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversations. We're going to be back onto a normal publication schedule, hopefully before this is even published and live. But as always, thank you all so much. This is, of course, a passion project. We all love what we're doing here, and we love for you to be with us. And if you're ever around any of the places where we are, whether that's Seattle with Pat, New York with me, doing some gypsy vagabond thing across various cities in China like Zongjun, or in Taipei with Emily, send a note to the Instagram, to the email. All of us would love to have tea with anyone who's reading and listening. So thank you all again. We're going to get, as I said, I promise, we're going to be back. We're going to finish this Yixing book. We're going to try to get back to a bi-weekly schedule, twice a month schedule. Cheers.
Stay tuned.